In this session, we are going to discuss finances as it pertains to your live school. We've already discussed the cost of live school at the time that the host application form was printed, being $1,300 US, which you will be responsible to pay unless you need a sponsor to help you, but you will contribute something. The only other cost that comes to live school will be the $10 US equivalent that each student who meets qualifications or requirements for a live school certificate to pay to Live School Organization for us to print the certificate and send it back to you. So those are the only two costs. All the other costs are costs that you incur in operating the school. They are costs that that you will want to cover, okay, through certain funding. But those costs and the funding won't come to us. You need to understand that. But we want to help you learn how you can operate your live school so that it is self-sustaining. That is our goal. That's what we would like to see, okay? So, the cost to budget and operate your live school. There are, in any business or ministry, there are what are called fixed costs, and then there are operating costs. First, we're going to talk about fixed costs, and then we're going to talk about operating costs. Fixed costs are costs that are more expensive. For instance, the cost of the church building is quite expensive. A pastor is not going to expect to pay off the cost of building a church building in 1 year. He will do what they call amortize the cost of the building over a period of years. He will spread the cost of that building that it costs to build it over a period of 5, 10, 15, maybe 30 years. Okay? Now, when it comes to live school, some of the fixed costs would be the cost of the live school unit itself, which we already discussed. Maybe the cost of the television or the monitor that you're going to use to run the school. If you do not have a reliable source of electricity, you may need to buy a generator or a solar panel setup to run your live school. Those would be fixed costs. If you have an older school, which actually are still very functional, that's on DVDs, if you do not have a quality DVD deck or a quality DVD player, you may need to purchase one of those. Those would be fixed costs that you may not be able to recover the cost on through your first intake of students. I would suggest on your fixed costs that you spread those costs, divide the total amount of those costs by the number of years in the agreement, which would be 5 years. And then try to capture 1/5 of the total fixed costs each year over 5 years, so that at the end of the 5 years, all the fixed costs are recovered. Okay? The second type of costs that you're going to have are operating costs. What does it cost you to operate the school, assuming you have all the equipment necessary to run the school? The cost of running the generator, if you have a generator, if you have to use a generator. Okay? What's the cost of the fuel? The cost of changing the oil. The cost of changing the spark plug, maybe one time each intake. The cost of changing the air filter, maybe one time per intake. Okay? Those are all operating costs that you want each intake to be able to cover. What about the cost of administrative overhead? Printing forms. Okay? Making the folders to keep your intake. Those are small costs, but they add up. Okay? What about costs of transportation to and from outreaches if you're not going to walk there or just meet everybody there for your short outreaches, or when you go to a village? For your longer term outreach, you will need to plan the cost of, you will have to budget what it's going to cost you to do your outreach, where you're going on outreach. okay, on the outreach phase. Then finally, what will it cost you to hold a graduation service? Things like the cost of a gown rental if you're going to have a formal graduation, okay? The cost of food if you're going to have food afterwards. The cost of maybe some special gifts to just bless your students for certain character traits that they displayed, that you could honor them in front of others for doing the great thing that they're doing. Those type of things you want to budget and make a budget for. Those are costs. There are also additional costs if you're running a full-time school that you will need to consider and budget. That would be your accommodation costs for the students, the food and other basic needs for the students, the additional transportation needs to get, if you have to transport them from where they're staying altogether to where they're going to meet for the venue, okay? And any other additional administrative costs. You'll have more administrative costs surely for a resident full-time school. However, I will say those will be your most profitable schools in terms of impact in the students' lives, okay? Now, there's different ways that you can recoup the costs that we're talking about. I already suggested that you divide your fixed costs up over a certain time frame. I suggested 5 years, which is the typical time of the agreement, and then that your operation costs you want to cover every year. You will work that all together into a budget and say, wow, I am planning on having 10 students, and it's going to cost these students a certain amount of money to cover all these costs. You need to plan when you're trying to recoup the costs from tuition and so forth and so on. You need to plan that not everybody who starts live school typically ends live school. You may have some quit on you. You may have some that have to move. You may have some students that die. God forbid, but it may happen. So don't plan on, when you're making your budget, if you're going to have 10 students, that all 10 are going to complete the school. So you want your live school to be able to be funded and not operate and have to go into debt. So I would suggest that maybe if you have 10 students, that you plan on 8 students being able to support the cost of running those operational costs, okay? Anything extra can go to help you improve, or go toward purchasing another generator, or go toward purchasing a solar panel, or go toward outreach for relief giving, to build bridges into communities where you're trying to do work, toward the church planting, all sorts of things, okay? Different potential income possibilities for your live school to cover these costs we just discussed. The costs are real. We have many schools, particularly I have experienced many schools say, we're not going to charge our students anything. We're just going to let them go through. We're going to pay for the cost of the fuel, the generator. It's no problem. And then halfway through the school, suddenly the real cost starts hitting the church. And they say, hey, we need to charge these students something to pay for the cost of the fuel. We can't afford this. And so now then the facilitator goes and tells the students midstream through the intake, we need you to contribute $5 a month toward the fuel, each of you, so we can continue the school. And then the students get offended. They think you're taking advantage of them. So take our advice, believe in our process, and plan out your budget and make a way to capture them. Apply the treasure principle that I spoke to you about earlier. Where your treasure is, there your heart is also. You want students who place value on what they're going through. Live School has got some of the best missions teaching and training available that you can find anywhere. It works on the whole man. It starts with the character of the person. It goes then and renews with theology, the mind of the person. It begins and develops missiology and evangelism methods, how to build into communities. And then it gets very practical. It's outreach oriented and it accomplishes results. Okay? You don't want to pick students to run your school who are not going to place value on it. Just like we're requiring you to contribute toward the school, you should make the students contribute toward the school. What are ways you can do that? There are several different ways. In the country that I come from, if you were going to apply to a school, you would fill out an application. We've talked about you filling out an application already. To fill out an application where I come from, you would have to pay an application fee. It might be $15, it might be $50 US. Just to apply. That doesn't guarantee that you're going to get in. It's non-refundable. I'm not saying that you have to do that. I'm saying this is one of the ways where you might be able to recoup some of the money or to offset the cost of running the school. The second way you could do that is to charge a registration fee. If you go to university, you will have to pay a registration fee. In other words, you get accepted. When you go to sign up for your classes, you would pay a registration fee just to register. I'm not saying you have to. That's a possibility of a way for you to pay for some of the school. The main way I will recommend to you that you raise funds to pay for the cost of operating your school would be to charge your students a tuition payment. In the region I work in, that would normally be paid monthly, a month in advance. In advance. The treasure principle is at work here. Where your treasure is, there your heart is. If you do it at the end, when it gets tough, they're going to take off. Life school is not easy to go through. It requires perseverance and endurance. So being invested in it will help encourage them to stay committed. Okay? So your tuition payment, you would want them to pay that a month in advance. You may want them to come up with all the money up front for the whole thing. I don't know. That's up between you and them. None of these things I'm talking about right now are funds that come to Live School. I want you to understand that. Let me just also mention, you would want that concerning this whole thing, that in Luke chapter 14, verse 28 through 30, Jesus said, which one of you, when he builds a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has the foundation laid and is not able to finish, those who observe it will begin to ridicule him, saying, this man began to build, but was not able to finish. Let me just say something. You do not want to be this man or woman. Plan. Plan is not a cuss word. It is a good word. Okay? Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead surely to advantage, but everyone who is hasty comes surely to poverty. Take the time to plan your schedule. Take the time to plan your outreach. Take the time to plan your budget. Okay? Take the time to plan your school. Preparation time is not wasted time. I used to have a professor that told me you can cut down a forest with a handsaw, but it's a lot quicker if you have a chainsaw. Okay? If you will plan, you will find that you will cut down a lot more trees. You will accomplish a lot more. Proverbs 6, verse 6 through 11. Go to the ant, O sluggard. Observe her ways and be wise, which having no chief officer or ruler, prepares her food in the summer and gathers her provision in the harvest. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Your poverty will come in like a vagabond and your need like an unarmed man. Planning, being diligent, doing things with the spirit of excellence. These are things that we're talking about here. Tuition is the main way you can recoup this cost of operating the school. Other ways that you can recoup the cost would include special projects or other fundraisers. You may be able to raise funds by doing some group work with your students, maybe doing a car wash doing it a volunteer car wash where people donate. Maybe you basically hire your students out to church members or to other people for a fee. And all that money is agreed to go toward this. Okay? Farming. Farming is an awesome way in many parts of the world to actually not only offset some of the costs by providing food if you're in a resident full-time school, or selling the products as a way to raise funds for the school. Okay? In-kind donations like food, maybe for the graduation, the women and the church would like to get together and produce the food and donate it and put on a meal or appetizers after the graduation. Okay? Another way you could raise money is special offerings. You might have a Mission Sunday where you raise a special offering for the school. The founder of Live School, Willie Crew, is known for a fundraising, a giving plan that's called Faith Promise. It's Faith Promise that would go toward missions, where basically you have a program where you tell your people in your church to make an agreement or to say, I will give a certain percentage of money that comes in over and above what I normally bring in a month. I will give a certain percentage of that toward missions. You would be amazed at the amount of money that has come in to fund missions work that way. Why is that? It's because Father's heart, your Father and my Father's heart, His desire is that this gospel message get to those people who haven't heard. And they're in the hard place. And it's not easy to get to them. And it's not inexpensive. Ministry requires money. It requires money to go from point A to point B. Last but not least, let me just say, pray. China Inland Mission, the founder, Hudson Taylor, trained himself to depend on God. His rationale was, when I get to China, I'll have no one to claim anyone for anything. His only claim would be on God. How important, therefore, he said, that he should learn before leaving England to move man through God in prayer alone. In other words, God answers prayer, faith-filled prayer. It's not the need that's going to move your God and my God. Faith is what moves God. One of the 6 distinctive features of China Inland Mission was that they made no appeals for funds. That's absolutely amazing. Actually, Hudson Taylor said God's work done God's way will never lack the supplies. We're chose to walk by faith. The just shall live by faith. So I want to encourage you. I'm not telling you don't make appeal for funds. I'm just telling you, whatever you do, make sure you're doing it in the obedience of faith. Okay? Now, your facilitator developer will answer any questions you have. And I would like to just say, in parting, I'd like to leave you with one verse. Actually, 2 verses. Psalm 67, verses 1 and 2. May the Lord bless you and keep you and make His face to shine upon you, that all the nations of the earth might know the glory of the Lord. God bless you.